Yeah, again, thanks for your time and attention today. And yeah, hopefully what I'll provide today is a bit of a build and a bit of a commercial flavour, if you like, on the application of our first-party data, as well as some success stories, a bit of a sprinkle of various sort of metrics. And I think it's important, it's been touched on, but beyond just the pure play media metrics, how we're solving for things more holistically as it relates to also business and brand KPIs. So yeah, just without sort of, I guess I've jumped straight into it, but Phil Hammond, head of commercial data at Paramount. And yeah, we'll take you on a bit of a journey today in terms of our as-is state, keeping in mind, if you like, that state of flux and sort of where everything's going at the moment, which has been discussed today. So initially, just to get us going, I think it's important, like all media owners, and Paramount's just one example of a media owner here in Australia, really sort of landing how we can capitalise on the data opportunity in the context of the overall media opportunity. So you hear a lot from the likes of 7, 9, SBS ourselves. We'll talk a lot about our premium content environment. We'll talk a lot about our data-informed ad experiences, and each of us are sort of taking that to market in a subtly different way. But we think data and product, better together, dare I say it, is obviously the future as it relates to evolving kind of customer and consumer expectations. The third kicker as well, which we think is a really interesting opportunity, especially from a media owner perspective, is addressable connected television. Now, obviously, connected TV doesn't have identifiers such as cookies, such as IDFAs, such as all forms of MAIDs essentially. So how we can work with addressable connected TV is critical as to how we stitch it all together. Ultimately, this will enable us to deliver a most relevant, compelling consumer experiences. And furthermore, where the pressure's coming from, of course, is marketers. They're increasingly seeking new opportunities to capture and capitalise on this environment. And furthermore, not just capitalise and deliver their ads in this space, but more tangible proof points in terms of the role of BVOD connected TV in their channel mix. And furthermore, more and more transparency and more visibility as it relates to the role that it plays. And not taking the publisher or media owner's word for it, but being able to perform their own attribution analytics in their environment so they can compare and contrast the role of connected TV in their overall mix. So what we've got here is just a bit of an example, and we've got obviously representation across this morning's summit, the likes of LiveRamp, the likes of InfoSum, also obviously there are vendors such as Snowflake as well, which was touched on, that can perform these types of sort of end-to-end data collaboration processes. But we'll just talk to our LiveRamp partnership here today. So first and foremost, how we support data collaboration is whether a particular client has first-party data or not, there's an opportunity to leverage profiling to firstly better understand those audiences in terms of how they can be found from a targeting perspective or from a non-customer perspective across Paramount, which could include the 10 plays, the Plutos, and the soon-to-come Paramount Plus. Ultimately, how we unify that overall view, if a client does have first-party data, they can safely and securely work with the likes of LiveRamp, underpinned by that RAMP ID, and be able to sort of understand, for example, what are the profiles of their audiences? So what are the genres that they most enjoy? What are the TV shows? How does that inform a data targeting strategy? But furthermore, how could it help inform a creative strategy? Because I think as it relates to this type of collaboration, I think it's important to think about not just the data, but also the creative execution. So we learn more about those customer groups and we help input our response as a result of that process. Once we have a good understanding and understand more about the consumer, we've got an opportunity to think about what's the data targeting strategy. Again, who do we go after? Is it a new audience? For example, if we've, for example, taken a people 25 to 54 audience, that it's been a tried and tested, are there some interesting nuances that's worth setting aside some budget at a different line item level to understand the role that a different audience to expand the current kind of or previous sort of thinking as it relates to that target audience? How could that form a sort of a mix for the future? So we'll actively target these accounts, or these customers, these members, or we'll suppress them, and that will form part of the campaign build. Clearly understanding, the way that they want to activate, be it through direct, be it through programmatic, will be considered, and obviously there might be some pros and cons in terms of being able to sort of go about it that way. But I think the really, really important thing, and it's sort of come through quite consistently throughout a lot of the panels already today, is how do we maximize the effectiveness of this particular channel within the marketing mix, and how do we justify, if you like, ongoing expenditure within this particular channel. So being able to either deliver some light dashboarding capability, we've referred to it often across the ecosystem as better understanding the person behind the impression or the cohorts behind the impression, providing that shade and colour around who did we hit. And that's really, really important and starts to move the conversation, and it has started to move the conversation well away from just what's easy to measure, the likes of click-through rates, the likes of basic media metrics. So within this small little preso, we'll talk a little bit about some of those brand metrics, some of the, I guess, partners that we're partnering with to be able to help sort of answer those questions. And as I say, objectively, not taking the media owner's word for it. And I think that the nuance that we're starting to see is obviously a move away from cookies and maids. It's very much to be more of a personal level approach, and how do we, at the end of the day, ensure that our compliance, if you like, keeps up with that trend. So when we're thinking about leveraging that end-to-end approach that we just discussed there, it's really about identifying strategic opportunities for growth around the use of data. We'll take in the audience insights, we'll take in the research insights, and we'll ensure that we're responding with the client's objective in mind. So not starting with data and tech, starting with the objectives and then working back from there. And what that means is we may have certain products, data products that we've built out, and it's not about just ticking a box or just lobbing that particular one as it is off the shelf at a particular client challenge. It's about ensuring that we're meaningfully and thoughtfully showcasing throughout the engagement that through the right application of this data and this product, we can show you succinctly how we could start to test and learn and how we could start to disprove or qualify a particular hypothesis that they may have in mind. But it's really important that what we're doing here is, again, based on the old adage around the plan by measure. It's really about what do we take away from the activation and what baselines are we creating. If there hasn't been precedence within this space, what does good start to look like? And then how do we start adjusting various variables to start to change and obviously optimize that marketing spend, especially for those clients that are new to connected TV or BVOD. So we've put together a framework that we've been rolling out with our agencies and our brand partners. And as you'll see here, it's a framework that allows us to derive actionable insight from a test and learn perspective. So it starts with the hypothesis. So what are the key measures that we're looking to validate and essentially provide that actionable insight off the back? So the hypothesis needs to be quite sharp. There might be lots of hypotheses that, you know, they may be wanting to test in due course, but it's best to start with something relatively sort of simple, and we'll talk about not trying to sort of test and learn on too many variables all at the same time. The approach is obviously critical, so ensuring that when we think about our budget, for example, we really want to be thinking about the size and scale and an appropriate way in which we want to be able to sort of provide a response. So there's no point sort of going too heavy on a particular like, hyper-addressable approach. It's really ensuring that we're right-sizing, if you like, the size and scale element, and it's beyond match rates. There's a lot more to it, of course, but ensuring that we're working really closely with our clients and with our agency partners to ensure that it's a thoughtful and meaningful way. The audience itself could come in the form of a targeting strategy, as we say. It may come in the form of suppression. And obviously there's been a little bit of chat today about ID solutions, interoperability, etc. A lot of be at the News Corp presentation, which was really strong, and then, you know, thinking about some of the other chat around the identity solutions. We're not beholden to one particular identity solution. I think, you know, there's the terminology around plug and play your way or agnostic. We want to reduce the friction, and we know that there are various IDs out there, and everyone's seeking a truthful view across the overall media landscape as it relates to identity. So, you know, thinking about where we're positioned, which I'll talk to in a moment, elevating it away from devices, elevating it away from IP addresses will be critical to that, and obviously with consent embedded, which is obviously a really important and foundational item to that. Activation as well. Again, depending on where you're at as media owners, as advertisers, as agencies, you may have preferred SSP, DSP combinations. So again, thinking about the identity that comes with those integrations, thinking about the way and the controls that you want to have over your buy, and thinking about things such as frequency capping is obviously critical. But this is sort of the end-to-end framework that allows us to facilitate those conversations, and we use as a basis of these types of engagements. So this is where we get to consumer privacy underpinning our approach, with obviously data governance and data privacy agreements fundamental to that. So we've spoken about, and we've heard a lot about consent and obviously T's and C's. Now, as media owners, we're fortunate in a lot of ways, but trust is obviously fundamental to that being fortunate position. We often have member gating, which allows us to have a conversation and earn the right to ask for consent upon login. And with that consent allows us to do things from maybe a marketing perspective. So it might be about service messages, it might be about content recommendations in that marketing context, but equally as well, there's an advertising application. So it's really important that we continue, and this will come through with the evolving regulations. It's really important that it's really clear to get to the T's and C's. The language becomes less and less ambiguous. The ability at more of a person level, that logged in level, to be able to understand where consent's been given, where it hasn't, its expression, will continue to be a focus, and those items will continue to need to be tightened up and arguably standardised as being discussed across all of the media owners within the Australian space especially. But being able to allow an individual to go in and change their consent management. We're working globally at Paramount with OneTrust as a consent management tool, and we'll continue to sort of work within that space as we continue to unify the opportunity, if you like, for brands and agencies across Paramount. Collaboration is critical, obviously, but when we're talking about collaboration, it's collaboration with the ecosystem outside of Paramount, but where we've put a hell of a lot of investment is collaboration cross-functionally with our teams. So thinking obviously with our data privacy officer, working very closely with our privacy teams, working with our product teams, working with our data platform teams, having really clear diagrams, having really clear roles and responsibilities and access levels, keeping in front of that, ensuring that we're investing a lot of our time from a commercial team perspective into what we're trying to do, our as-is state, and that could include not just what we're trying to do for advertisers and agencies, but it equally could include how we're working with second-party data partners. And as we obviously heard, there's going to be continual evolution. We're engaging with our second-party data partners, but again, that collaboration internally and investing time in them and them investing time in us and almost peering around the corner with us as it relates to regulatory changes, not just scraping in and not just sort of passing that hurdle, but arguably putting prudential steps in place to remain in front of regulation is a sort of an aspiration or a principle that we continue to operate around. And then with data privacy agreements, there's a thought that, there's lots of applications or use cases of how you data collaborate. It could be profiling, it could be activation suppression, or it could be attribution. What we've found to be useful is, again, investment with our data teams, our privacy teams, and rather than trying to sort of create a privacy agreement that's sort of one size fits all for every possible use case, we've found it to be more useful working with brands, agencies, to be able to sort of modulise, if you like, our data sharing agreements and ensure that we're not biting off everything or trying to sort of, if we just do it up front, we won't have to have the problem in the future. I think what's been really helpful is modularising it, ensuring that we're reducing wherever possible ambiguous language and making it clear, making it plain. And that's allowed us to get really quick with more and more data privacy sort of agreements, and I think that's in the best interest of everyone as we all level up and as we all grow that muscle memory within this space. I'll just quickly touch on this because I think I've sort of spoken to it in a little bit of detail, but once the client challenge has been established, these are the considerations that we essentially will go through to maximise that value within a test and learn framework capacity. Understanding what success looks like is critical, and arguably there's a lot of alignment there as it relates to alignment on KPIs to demonstrate success. There's a lot of things that, there may be an eagerness to sort of test and learn within the first go, but I think it's really important to remain disciplined, remain really clear as it relates to what the baselines need to be and how we can start to sort of selectively start to influence some of those outcomes and create a sustainable sort of program of work beyond that first execution or beyond that proof of concept. Scalable solutions, absolutely critical. We've touched on that. It's not just about dangling a data or technology approach at a particular business challenge. It's starting with what's the objectives and working back from there. And again, thinking about addressability in a responsible capacity. What's the right combination of matched or non-matched audiences? What's the combination of traditional buying demographics? And what's the appropriate use of lookalike modelling in order to come up with a meaningful and a measurable approach to any activation? I've mentioned it before, but the limiting the testing variables is critical, obviously, to enable a proof of performance output for marketers in line with their ongoing expectations. So what I'll quickly do now is just sprinkle a couple of, I guess, stats as it relates to some success stories as it relates to the use of first and second party data. And I think what's really important here is, again, the fundamental shift away from just measuring media metrics and really ensuring connected TV, BVOD, it's often been easier, if you like, to measure a performance outcome, but really ensuring that we're doing it justice as it relates to this particular channel, not just being able to measure a performance or a sales outcome, but the role it plays in terms of brand building, the longer term success of BVOD and connected TV. So we've got an example here, working with a retail client, essentially on behalf of their brands. So, a couple of the, a few of the pillars that we kind of set up in partnership with the retail client was how we're looking to sort of drive some incremental revenue, of course, as it relates to commercial aspirations. We wanted to proactively demonstrate, as I've touched on, the full funnel role of BVOD, the value proposition that it delivers to incremental stakeholders that perhaps have worked with video but haven't worked with connected TV, as an example. It's really important when we're setting up these programs of work that it's almost worth setting up a RACI, really sort of being clear, because often with this type of work, there's a standard way of working, there's investment teams, there's trading teams, there's agencies, and it's really important that you get the right team together early, you remain sort of really clear as to the role that each will play throughout the process, and that will ultimately allow as seamless as possible end-to-end process, especially when you're learning and sort of working through those growing pains. Equally as well, with budgets set aside for test and learn, it's really clear that that's communicated, so everybody knows where it's coming from, and that can sort of resolve, if you like, downstream impacts around conflict and sort of at the end of the day, understanding where possible budgets could be coming from in the future. Elevating reputation. So us and our retail partner, we're really looking to pioneer a way that we could sort of really demonstrate the channel in terms of driving business outcomes and brand outcomes beyond those media metrics as discussed. It's really about challenging, at times maybe a single-minded sort of focus on performance metrics. It's sometimes easier to measure these, but is it the right thing for longer-term brand building? And that's a partnership-based discussion, which just from our learnings, we just continue to encourage for you to have those equivalent conversations when you're embarking on these tests and learns. And then, thinking about proof of performance measures, it's really, critical just to be continuing to think about the long and the short. Furthermore, we're equally finding as well that there's a real desire to test, new data-driven, premium, more immersive ad formats. So it's exploring how we can get those ad formats into the test and learn framework. Often they've been done directly, but there's more and more of an appetite, as you would anticipate, programmatically to be able to tap into some of these newer ad formats. So areas that we're working on as it relates to sort of qualifying test and learn and sort of proof of performance are items such as how we're safely and securely working with brands around log files, exposure files, resolve back to that, for example, RAMP ID as an example, really giving those brands an opportunity that have the analytics environments in-house to be able to perform their own analytics. Now, it could be, for example, signals such as the genre that a particular ad was sort of served in. Obviously, the concept of timestamp allows for frequency analysis as well. But yeah, equally, if there are different ad formats being tested, to be able to ensure that detail is available to allow those data scientists within those analytics teams to run their own attribution and have that transparency to compare with other channels is clearly something that's going to hopefully continue to drive adoption of data collaboration and the actionability of the insight derived. And again, I think it just comes down to collaboration, but once you start to see agencies and their brands start to see a different way of looking at the media and having that transparency and having that blended view of performance and brand, there's an opportunity to challenge, traditional CPM positions and think about it more as a value conversation and an unlock to drive business advantage ultimately for those brands. And then we've just got a few real world statistics, if you like, across just a few of the brands that we worked with our retail partner on. So you can start to see here, as I'm sure a lot of you within the room have started to test, but the ability to be able to bring the exposure information, work with brands that have the point of sale information, the opportunity to be able to share return on investment and return on advertising spend metrics, really be able to start to understand the role of segmentation and different segmentation and activation as it relates to new to brand or new to category types of outputs. Equally, it's not probably recommended just to test the one segmentation. Testing multiple segmentation will allow an opportunity to see which one's working the hardest. As I say, the combination of frequency with targeting is clearly a one to really start sort of playing with initially. And I've sort of mentioned as well, genre is also one from an in-flight perspective. When you're sharing data logs within a campaign itself, it does allow you as a media owner to work with an agency, the brand, to sort of skew, if you like, certain spend towards certain genres that might be working harder for that particular advertising burst. So that's equally like often like frequency of response to be able to sort of actually showcase that it's actually something that could be used in flight is really, really important. So a bit of a flavour from a performance perspective. And then here's another example working with a CPG brand in a sort of hypothesis approach where customers who purchase in retail channel will exhibit higher responsiveness to ads, resulting in higher conversion with retail and other sales channels. I think what's important to say here is that the variant and the control were both targeted with advertising. It was just a different targeting pool. The variant had individuals that had previously purchased ready-to-heat meals, and the control was more of your traditional buying demographic. So what we're able to show here was our media, brand, and business outcomes. We were able to showcase that the variant, or the ready-to-heat meals, did work harder in terms of higher than the control from a brand perspective, working with Lucid on this occasion. From a business perspective, we were able to showcase that there were greater point of sale outcomes within the Flybuys ecosystem. And then working directly with the brand, they were able to see that there was a higher conversion on the website as it relates to sort of creating those subscriptions moving forward. So an example of not just looking at one particular measure of a success, but looking at a blend of how it sort of can ladder up to ultimate outcome. So with that in mind, just on a page, just the key learnings to date, as you'll see here, are across our legal, are across measurement, approach, activation, and people and process. But I think probably just in the spirit of time as well, JJ, mobilising data privacy agreements in advance and really getting in front of those conversations is critical, as well as having the conversations up front with the relevant buying teams will solve a lot of problems in the sort of the medium term. From an approach perspective, agree on the viable control factor and relevant considerations in the review, and wherever possible, controlling either activity in market, which is sometimes easy to say, harder to do, especially for well-established brands, but the more that you can control when you're kicking off a hypothesis program of work would certainly be recommended even. And then from a people and process perspective, just to close, really ensure that you are investing in that cross-functional discipline, and really ensure that there's an ongoing kind of framework there to ensure that everything that you're setting up is tested, it's validated, and ultimately actionable insight is something that falls out of it through those cases. So much for your time and attention, and yeah, look forward to